In this session, we will cover area lights used in 3D rendering. In X16, area lights were introduced. Area lights are emissive materials that produce light in GPU ray trace views. Any material set to be emissive, fireplaces, TV screens, light bulb glass, and vertical rope will produce light in views such as physically based render or PBR ray trace. Light is not produced in other camera views with the exception of clay ray trace. Since area lights are a surface like a TV screen versus a punctual light with a single light point such as a recessed can, they are called area lights. Now that you know area lights are emissive materials that produce light in GPU ray trace views, let's take a look at the settings and how you can optimize your 3D renderings. In this sample plan that I have open, the entire scene is lit using area lights, with the exception of the rope light that is underneath the cabinet above the sink. Let's take a look at a couple of the settings for the area lights. Using the Adjust Material Definition tool or the Rainbow tool, I'm going to come over and I'm going to click on our door logo, the bright blue portion. In the Define Material dialog, the panel that I'm after is on the Properties panel. And then toward the middle of the dialog is the category for emissivity. The setting is set to be 250. There's a number available from the drop-down. You can also type in a very specific number. Since there's an emissive value, this logo is emitting light in a ray trace scene. I mentioned earlier, it can either emit light in the physically based ray trace scene or in the clay ray trace scene. Immediately below the emissive material, apply emissivity and color from the lights. I'm going to talk about that when I go into another room scene. Effectively, that is using a light itself. In this case, I have a fluorescent light, and the program can use the emissivity from that light as well as the color for the area light. For the material, it's in a material class called General Material. Not all material classes can have emissivity. The General class has emissivity, the Translucent class has emissivity, and also the Transparent class has emissivity for the values. The other materials, there is no emissivity setting. So to set emissivity, make sure that you're using the correct material class for the material. In this case, by changing the material, notice that it had lost the emissivity. I'll just go ahead and set that back to the 250 for that Chief Architect logo. Now for this specific scene, let me reset the camera and let's start from the beginning and take a look at how to set the area lights. So I'm going to go ahead and use this Reset Camera setting. This is the beginning state for the 3D render that I began with. It's during the day, and you're going to notice that the fluorescent lights in the ceiling are on, and maybe a few other lights, maybe the rope light is on as well. In my rendering scenes, I will typically always use a light set. And I'm going to control this scene and delve into area lights using light sets. Let's make sure we know what we're talking about with the light sets. I'm going to come up into the Edit Active View tool. Toward the bottom of the dialog is using a light set. You can see that I've set mine up to be a garage. This is a larger house, and I like to control the lighting specifically by room or maybe by a grouping of rooms. You can see I have a bedroom and bath light set. The program, if you go into an automatic mode, will typically turn on, in this case, 20 lights, and that may not be the exact number of lights, or from the exact room, the program will choose which ones it thinks will best turn on. I find it's best to use a light set, and when I use a light set, you can come in here. Let's go ahead and click on the Adjust Lights for just a minute. And before I talk about all the different lights in here, you can see here are the names. You can make a copy of that, and then you can sort this based on room, and then turn on the different lights that you want. In this case, it's sorted by room, so as you scroll down, I have all the lights on, for the most part, for the garage in this specific light set. Now, for the area lights to look good, the first thing I'm going to want to do is turn off the sun that's coming through the windows. You can see a sunspot right in here. I want to get a nice pop with an evening or even night shot to get the area lights on. So what I've done in here is I've created a light set specifically, and I'm going to begin with limited lights. When I select this, I've only got two things that are going to be turned on. It's going to be my floor logo as well as the tail lights on the car. Then I'm going to also turn off the Use Sunlight option. So let's go ahead and close this and take a look at how the scene then updates. So this will take a minute. I've got it set to be 350 passes in here. So the only two lights that are set to be on in this case is the floor logo, which is an emissive material, and also the tail lights. So you can see that we have a little bit of pop out of those two things. Now as I go back into the Edit Active view, let's come down and let's switch that over to the garage with all area lights on. And let's take a look at how the scene is then going to update with all of these lights being turned on. You're going to notice that I have some neon signs on the back wall. I have a gas pump. I have a TV screen. I have a seating arrangement. I've turned some of the materials on to be emissive, and in the case for the floor logo, I have specifically turned that off to show the scene with the area lights. Area lights can add a lot into the scene. Let's pick on this gas pump back in here. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to use the tool to find in Library down here in my lower Edit toolbar. And I'm going to choose the gas pump itself, and then let's go ahead and find that in our library. Once the library opens, I'm already in that mode to place the gas can. Let's go ahead and place this in the middle of the room. There's a big difference between the one that I just placed and the one in the back. You see how the one in the back of the room has a nice glow to it? That's because I've set three explicit emissive materials, one on the red, one on the green, and then one on the sign itself. And by doing that, you can see that it's added a nice glow in here. So the default out of the library is not to have the emissive materials on. Let's just borrow the materials from that existing gas can, and let's take a look at the difference. So I'm going to use the material eyedropper. I'm going to click on the red portion. Let's come over here, click on the red portion over here. And you'll notice that the red is now glowing. It's using the exact same material, which is set to have an emissive value. If I repeat that same process, I'll grab the green from the top, apply it onto the top, and then one more, we'll grab the sign and apply it to this sign. And now you see we're getting more light added into the scene. Now, I've done all of this in 3D. And just like placing a light in 3D, it will automatically be turned on in the specific light set. If I click on the gas pump, notice in the lower Edit menu is the Off button. That will turn off this specific light source for that light set. You can see how it's now dimmed. The light needs to be turned on, and when I created the emissive materials, there were three specific emissive materials, the red, green, and then the sign itself. They either need to be all on or all off. And you can either go into the Adjust Materials dialog, or you can click on the object, come down into your lower Edit menu, and then explicitly turn the light on. Again, it needs to be all or nothing for the emissive lights to turn on and off. Let's take a look at this gas pump and other lights in the Adjust Lights dialog. Through the Edit Active view, I'm going to come down underneath the lighting and click on Adjust Lights. In the Adjust Lights dialog, I have this sorted based on room. All my garage lights are showing up in an order. You can sort this based on the count or floor number. In this case, I have it by room. And if we take a look at the gas pump, and let's expand this underneath the Adjust Light, there are three emissive materials, the green, the checkered flag, the sign, and then the dark red. These lights will need to either all be on or all be off. You can do that by unchecking the on button, and then you notice how they X out. If I turn it back on, you'll see the check mark in all of them. For light fixtures, let's scroll down to one of the fluorescent lights. These lights will typically always show the area light in the physically based ray trace view or the clay ray trace view. You can turn these lights on. Let's go ahead and turn this one on. And then if we expand the punctual lights, there's actually three lights. These can be turned on individually. In the ray trace view, if the area light is on, you can see the little check mark right in this area right here for the area lights. Use area lights. If that's turned on, the punctual lights will actually not produce light. It's one or the other. Let's take a look at this a little bit further now that I've turned it on. Let's close these dialogues. So you can see by turning that fluorescent light on, it lessened the impact of the other area lights from the neon signs and other emissive materials. When we take a look at this light fixture, let's double click, open it up. On the light data panel, here are the 3 punctual lights. They're all turned on. They're set to be a spot. The intensity. You can change the light data for each one of those specific light sources inside of this light. And then when you look at the materials panels, we kind of move over to the materials panel. The surface for the light lens is using a material called lighting white. And if we go in and let's take a look at that material a little bit further by select material. And then it's at the top of the list here. I'm just going to click the edit option. This material, lighting white, is a general material that has an emissivity of 40,000. Below that is the option to apply emissive and color from the lights. And as I close this and we return back into that particular light, the light data is set to be at 500 lumens on each one of those. That means that it will scale the emissivity of the area light to these values. So the emissivity will use the value from the light lumens versus the default value from the material we just looked at. That value can be overridden, and I'll talk about if you want to disconnect that for specialty lights when we go into a different room scene. Even though this has 3 punctual lights, the ray trace view will use the area light in place of this, and that's how you'll get your scene set up using area lights. The advantage of using an area light for this fixture is consistency of light across the entire surface. Let me bring up an example. This light is approximately 8 feet long by 8 inches wide. The 3 punctual lights create specific light points from the fixture that then cast shadows into the room accordingly. It may be a little bit difficult to see here, but the shadows are distinctly visible. Notice in the corners of the room. Using an area light on the glass surface of the fixture applies light across the entire surface for a smooth distribution of light. And this is the advantage area lights offer on fixtures, which may be noticeable on larger types of fixtures. Let's move on and take a look at a different type of a scene. In this kitchen render, I've changed the color of the lighting in the upper cabinets. You see an orange hue in the upper cabinets, a little bit less to the cabinet further away. These lights are deriving the color from that light and using an area light. Let me just click on this cabinet. Let's open up the doors so we can get to that light. So I'll just use this tool called Open Cabinet Doors. And now I can select this light, maybe a little carefully, but let's grab that light. Let's open it up and take a look at the properties. The background gets a little bit fuzzy. On the light panel portion for this rope light, you can see that the added light, the intensity again set to 500 lumens, and then I have the color set to this orange material. If we go over to the materials, you can see that it's using the lighting white. Remember, when we went into select material, the lighting white material is actually using the setting apply emissive and color from the lights. So the area light is going to ignore this information on the 40,000 setting for this emissive material because it's being derived from the light itself, which as we go back to the light data is really the intensity of 500 lumens and this color. So that is where that setting for your lights can be specific to the light fixture. Let's go ahead and cancel out of this. In most cases, that's the way you'll typically treat your lights. You'll set the light up, you'll set the lumens, you'll set the color, and then allow the material to derive it from that light. There may be times wherein you want to override it. If we look at the back of the scene, I've got a series of hoop lights. Sometimes, depending on the size of the light and the intensity, you may want to turn it down a little bit. Let's take a look at how I've disconnected the light value from the material itself. So I'm going to use the Adjust Material Definition. And let's just kind of click on this white area if I can get to it right in here. And in this case, for this light, I made a copy of that lighting white material. I put the value at the end of it, 12K, which matches the emissivity value of 12,000. Now the key to this is the check mark is removed from the Apply Emissive and Color from the light itself. So in this case, the material has been disconnected from the lumens in that light. So if I go back and let's double click on this particular light, you can see that I have the light intensity quite low, 100 lumens. You might ask, well, what's the use case in disconnecting the light value from that material? Sometimes I actually like to design in a standard view, and I don't want the view to get completely washed out. If I switch this camera over to the standard view, let's go ahead and switch the render technique over into the standard view here. The scene is bright, but it's not completely washed out. And possibly, if those hoop lights were set to 1200 lumens, 2000 lumens, it may create a lot of extra light, and in this standard view would be overly washed out. And that way I can get one camera that looks good in a standard render view and looks real good as well in the physically based view. As I switch that back, and that goes through the number of passes. That's the advantage of being able to disassociate the light with the material setting. Let's take a look at one final scene for the last portion of this session. In this bedroom render scene, I want to call out three specific area lights that I'm using. Fireplace, the television screen, and then the vertical rope light that I have over in the doorway as just a placeholder. With the Adjust Material Definition, let's start with the television screen. On the Texture panel, this is a photo that I imported from my cell phone. On the Properties panel, I put just a little bit of emissivity on the television or on the photo to give it a little bit of pop. If we take a look, use the Adjust Material Definition on the fire itself, you can see that I've also done a very slight emissivity on the fireplace. Might make it a little bit darker or greater emissivity if this were an evening scene. Now let's go over and take a look at this vertical rope light and look at the emissivity setting on this. You can see that the property or the material name is called Lighting White 2.5K. That matches the emissive value that I put down here. I made a copy, as we looked at earlier, of the material called Lighting White and then adjusted the emissivity of this. This emissivity value, the larger the surface, you can see that the surface on this rope light not overly large as far as the diameter of it. If that were a larger surface, I would probably increase the emissivity. The larger the object, the smaller the emissivity will be. Emissivity works in the physically based ray trace view. It also works in the clay view. Let's go ahead and switch over to the clay view. You'll notice in the clay view you don't get the images. Sometimes I like to use this view. Maybe clients don't focus on the wood grain material. You don't see the wood grain or the specific colors as much, and maybe allows you to focus on the space. Emissivity is giving you light. Pretty easy to see it coming out of the lamps and the emissivity from the light bulb glass that's inside of those lamps. Let me switch the camera back to the physically based render style. And as the number of passes are resolving on here, the last portion of this session I want to point you to are maybe some of the settings you can look at to optimize your rendering when you're using area lights specifically for interior scenes. I'm going to come up to the Edit Active view. Let's come down to the rendering technique for physically based. The first thing I want to point you to is I have shadows, and raycast shadows is going to give you a little crisper view in there. The ambient occlusion is set to 8%. Not really relevant for the physically based rendering, maybe more appropriate for standard. A few of the other settings that aren't as important, super resolution. If you're on maybe doing a walkthrough or have a real high resolution monitor, 4K plus monitor, 5K, You may want to adjust this. There's a few settings in here that you can adjust to get a little bit more performance out of it. I try to leave mine at 1. My screen is 1920 by 1080 most of the time. And then if we skip down to the lighting, sunlight, and then the adjust lights, notice that for the lights I have a bedroom light set. That means all of the lights that are important to me are turned on in that bedroom set. I don't have it set to be automatic. Adjust sunlight. If we take a peek at the sunlight setting, I have that set to a value pretty small, 500. Again, it depends on the type of scene that you're after. And then finally, some of the camera settings itself. Underneath the rendering technique, I'll click the define option. A few key settings. The exposure, really scene dependent. I'll show you a slide in a moment here with some of the key settings that are target. In this case, the exposure set to 0.25. There is a tone mapping. Tone mapping is the process of taking high dynamic rendering lighting values produced by the rendering and then mapping them to a range of display for your screen. Use ray tracing is turned on. You'll have to make sure that your computer is capable of ray tracing. Opaque bounces, and then transmissive and specular bounces. 3 and 4. You can learn about these settings. Just hit the help option. It will explain that. And then the maximum number of samples. We've changed that beginning in X16. It's changed to a higher number because the rendering has really changed underneath the hood. And then the backdrop intensity, subjective to if you're using a generated sky model, if you're using an overly bright background, again, kind of subjective. And then the very last thing oftentimes I like to do is maybe turn on the hand-drawn lines on top. You can see these edges between the ceiling and the wall right in here. Just a very small setting. And now I'll bring up this slide to show you as we kind of part here. This slide for settings is only a guideline, can be very subjective depending on your scenes. Let's recap from the previous cameras we looked at. Raycast shadows on, use a light set. That way you can control your lighting specifically. Ambient occlusion, not relevant for the PBR ray trace views. Sun, typically a range, a low value in the evening, higher value during the day. Backdrop image, good idea, or you can also use a generated sky. In the technique options for the camera, an exposure of 0.3, make sure ray tracing is turned on. Opaque bounce is set at 3. Transmissive and specular at 4, max samples at 350, and then the backdrop intensity, again, pretty subjective here, a range on the very low level at 1K up to 75K. Again, all of these settings are a guideline and subjective to the specific scene that you have. Well, that wraps up this session on area lights for 3D rendering. Thanks for watching, and I hope you create some great renders.
Thanks, Adrian. While we wait for people to raise their hands, in the beginning we asked in the surveys, do area lights count toward the light limit for a render camera? Can you explain that?
Sure, I can try to explain that. So you may be familiar that in your edit camera tools, so in your full camera specification, we have this area. I think Scott pointed out the number of lights that are being used for the maximum lights. And those reflect the number of lights that are turned on in your scene. So if you're using a standard view, which can't calculate area lights, then no, area lights won't count against that number. But if you're using the ray tracing tools, the real-time ray tracing, then those will count against the number of lights that are calculated in your scenes to some effect. There's some algorithm changes in there that may rely on that, but if you want full control of which lights are displayed and turned on, then that's a great reason to use a light set that Scott was describing.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Our first question comes from Victor. Hi, Victor, go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, I have a question. Can I take a picture of the backyard of my clients and use it as a backdrop? Can you show me how to do it?
Absolutely, yeah, that's something that we actually really encourage users to do. Let me just open a different view here that might lend itself a little bit better.
But will you share your screen too, Adrian? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit all the wrong buttons. It's like, okay, so if I have the scene open and perhaps outside of this window on the right, we want to show a background from a photo that you took. All you need to do is take that photo and load it onto your computer somewhere. And then from the, I think it's in the import, well, actually what we'll do is go to the library browser, and you can come to your user catalog and come to the new menu. And we're going to choose a backdrop. So a backdrop is different than other types of items, but let me go ahead and just choose, I don't have one on hand here. Well, here, let's use this. And then you get some abilities to set up how that backdrop is going to behave in your scene. So once you set these controls, just hit OK. And that's going to show up in your library browser. And then you can just use that backdrop and click in your scene, and it's going to apply it right to the scene. That control's also in your edit camera specification. So if you come into the camera specification dialog and come to this backdrop panel, you have a few controls here on how that backdrop's being used. Does that help?
But the backdrop only works from the house. It cannot be working from a patio, right?
You probably need to, yeah, you'll need to be standing outside so that your image is all exterior type of views. And often what you can do is take views standing from the different edges of the house, so from all four sides of the house, and then you can use a different backdrop for each of the cameras that you're using. So you can see a fairly realistic view through each of the windows, depending on where your camera is pointed.
Because I have a client and she doesn't want to see from her office neighborhood house. She wants to see it, their tree, they have it. So I have to maneuver with the house, and I want to show her what she's going to see it from her window.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so if you can get really close to the window and take the photo directly from there, then that's a good way to get an accurate backdrop from that specific angle.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, our next question is from Benny. Hi, Benny. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Adrian. This is Benny from Switzerland. I got actually two questions. The first one is, before I've been in contact a lot with a guy called Robert Smith, who posts a lot on LinkedIn. He's also a chief architect user, but he uses PC. And so when I asked him, because we have in Europe, we have, let's say, a lot really of these photorealistic requirements for projects when you go on sale for them. It's not the sketchy ones, which you probably use more in US. Here it's really the more photorealistic. People should think it's already there, although you haven't yet started building. And so he told me that he normally uses Adobe to rework it, and Lumion, and I don't know what. And so my question is now with X16, I just downloaded the beta version probably 1 week ago. My question is, do I get to, let's say, enough good result using just Chief Architect? Or do I still have with my Mac to use other programs to get it to a decent level? Because when I had a look at what Scott presented with the Porsche before, let's say this looked already, I would say, very good. The question is, do I get there, or what do you think?
Yeah, so we have good news for you for X16. We were able to implement this variation of ray tracing for the Mac version. So as long as, let me pull up the system requirements really quickly.
I got a new one actually, only for you. I just bought a new one.
Great. So yes, you'll be able to use this technique for your renderings. On the Macs, the processing is quite a little bit slower than on a PC. I wouldn't call it real time necessarily, but for sure, you just have to wait a few minutes and you can get a processed rendering exactly that you've seen on Scott's presentation.
Okay, cool. My second question is, let's say I liked a lot what Scott showed in his presentation, where he showed, let's say, which kind of variables you should put for getting a certain scene. Or is there a kind of, let's say, more than one scene where you see what you have to put in all these different variables for a morning scene, an evening scene, an interior, outside, whatever? Does Chief have a kind of list which helps? Because honestly speaking, I'm probably spending, if I'm designing, I'm probably spending 60–70% of my day with doing the houses and the interior. And normally for the rendering, unfortunately, I do not have the time to spend days and weeks to do that. So if I get there with a let's say with a shortcut by a chief architect, it would help me.
Yeah. So some of the variables like the lighting sets, is that the sort of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I would probably recommend doing is in Chief Architect, every time you start a brand new project, what's happening is a template plan is being loaded behind the scenes. And that template essentially sets those, establishes those initial settings. So the first time you do anything, you have a selection of presets. You can set up your template plan to have a set of light sets, but the caveat there is because every one of your projects may have a different number of actual light fixtures and that sort of thing in it. You would probably need to customize those preset light sets a little bit to make sure that they're included or not included for your different scenes. But I think that should be a relatively low impact as far as your project's concerned, just a few minutes for each project. But other than that, things like you'll be able to preset your camera defaults. So in the default settings here, you can set up all of those rendering techniques so that Scott was showing the properties for the physically based camera settings and the clay view and all of the other rendering techniques. You can set your preferences there, and you can also go into the actual camera tool settings. So things like this full perspective camera like I have on my screen, you can set up its behaviors so that they work the way that you prefer them to work. So that's a big time saver for getting a jump on each project.
Hey, my short last question: which one is the more realistic one, the CPU or the physically based? What would you say?
I may ask for somebody to chime in on that particular question. They both use ray tracing, which means that you have physically accurate lighting that comes through the different elements and bounces around. But Ryan, would you say that the GPU ray tracing is more realistic, or the CPU ray tracing?
I think that they both try to be realistic, but I do think that the GPU ray tracer is a more modern implementation of that, and we've probably done things there that haven't been done as accurately in the CPU ray tracer. I think really the issue that you'll run into with the CPU ray tracer is that it hasn't been updated for some time. So we're just able to do, and we have done a lot more modern things in the GPU ray tracer, and part of that means more accurate rendering.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, Adrian, real quick, just to go back to the second question on how to get some kind of quick, fast results for certain elements or moods or settings. The HDR backdrops can actually get you a lot of heavy lifting done. If you plop in, if you want an afternoon scene or a overcast scene or a wintry day scene, you can plop in a backdrop, and that'll really change the tone and the vibe of the scene without having to get to a lot of settings and a lot of nitty-gritty stuff. And then after that, if you still want to change some stuff, you can go back and change your settings. But just for like checking stuff out, the HDRIs really do make a big difference, and it's really easy to apply.
Yeah, so, and for X16, we did create a bonus catalog that are a selection of some HDRI backdrops. I'm trying to find those in my library browser here real quickly. So these can be downloaded from the library browser, or if you turn on your web search in your library browser, you can find all of the additional catalogs that are available. These are generally free of charge if your SSA is active. But what Dustin is referring to is you can choose an HDRI backdrop which has natural lighting essentially baked into the image. If you can Google search for these types of images too, and so there's a variety of those that are available for download that you can add to your scene by importing the backdrop, just like I kind of showed earlier. And just to kind of show where some of the controls are for that, I'm placing an HDRI backdrop into my scene right now. And let me choose a different camera. This one's not resolving very quickly. So let's put one in here. So I'll just click and I'll place an HDRI backdrop. I'm going to change to a physically based view. And then the one thing that you just want to check, if you are using this type of a backdrop, there's an additional setting you want to turn on to get that light play that's accurate. And that's right here in the physically based rendering technique options. You just check this box for use only the backdrop for lighting. And then it's going to take the pixels from that image and add those to the scene so that you get a much more realistic atmospheric light effect, I guess. Thanks, Dustin, that's helpful. All right, Carrie, do we have other questions?
Oh, we do, Adrian. If anybody does have a question, feel free to raise your hand. But Chelsea wrote in and she was wondering if you could explain what the difference is between on and using area lights checkboxes inside of the adjust lights panel.
Okay,
So
let's look. So in the adjust lights panel, so I have my adjust lights dialog right here, and we have two columns of checkboxes for on and use area lights. And I'm also using an automatic, so this is showing like it will use up to 1,000 lights in theory for this particular scene. That's a lot of lights. I'm going to change this to the default light set. And then let's kind of see what's in here. So I'll go ahead and set one of these light sets, and you can see that a variety of these checkboxes have been turned off. Well, it looks like all of them have been turned off. But you can also see that for each of these elements, there's a drop-down arrow. You can click on this arrow and it will expose all of the details that for light controls that are associated with this particular object. And this particular item only has an area light. Let's see if we can find one that has both an area light and a punctual light or a light source. So here's an example in this recessed down light. We have a light 1, so this has the controls that allow you to set up the lumen value and the emitting color for the light fixture. And it also has an area light, and that means that material that's assigned to the diffuser or the piece of glass on that can light is using an emissive material. So if we turn it on, let's go ahead and turn on at the top level, it just turns on the light so that it's going to behave in the automatic or default way in your scene. But the use area light controls allows you to overwrite which of these two lights are being used. So in a PBR ray trace, if the light has an emissive material like this one does, it's going to defer to the area light and use that as the what is calculating the light contribution to the scene. So if you choose for some reason not to want to use that emissive material as a contribution to your scene, then you can turn off the use area light column and it will just defer to that light source that has the lumen values and the light temperature attachments to it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Our next question is from Norman. Hi, Norman. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Adrian. How you going?
Hey.
Hey, if I'm working on a plan and I set up a camera view and I've got all the settings, is it possible to transfer those camera views to another camera in a different plan or a different room?
Yes. I don't know if there's necessarily a transfer function, but what you can do is copy and paste your cameras. So I can choose any of these saved cameras that are already set up with maybe my rendering technique, a specific backdrop, all of those sorts of values. And I can just do simply a copy, and I can click to paste. I can do point-to-point move, copy, paste in place, all of those sorts of things. And then you have the controls to just, oops, that's the label, but you can maneuver this guy and rotate it around and change its field of view and all of those sorts of things. So it retains, and this would be helpful to that previous Benny's question also, you can retain some of those elements that you like in a particular camera and just transfer it around your plan or between different projects. So it's really handy.
Okay, so if I just started a general plan and set up a whole lot of cameras and kept that as, say, my camera plan, can I put that on one screen and then just copy those cameras into the project I'm working on?
Yep, absolutely. That's a really great way to get a jump start if you know that you have preferences on how some of your cameras and scenes look.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Adrian, our next question is from Sean. Hi, Sean. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Sean.
All right, let's check in with Irene. Hi, Irene. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Adrian. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. So I'm using cheaper, I'm using Home Designer Pro 2024, and I was wondering, so this ray trace technique came like a total surprise, like pleasant surprise to me. I've never used it before. I usually use just a regular floor camera to create 3D views, and I was just wondering how many of those tools and how much of those techniques are available in the program I'm using. It's Home Designer Pro 2024.
In Home Designer Pro, I believe in Home Designer Pro you do have a limited set of options.
That's what I figured.
Yeah,
that's why I've never seen
it. Yep. So in Home Designer Pro, you do have the option to use the physically based view, but the ray tracing part of that tool is not available. So it will look a little bit more like there's an option in here. If I turn off use ray tracing, this is essentially the equivalent of what you would have in Home Designer Pro. So some of the things that you are missing are the contribution of area lights to the scene, like we're talking about. Instead, the lights will just kind of look very bright, even though they're not adding illumination to the actual scene. Yeah, and so you'll miss out on a few other functionality like that. So that's a great reason to look at trying Chief Premiere if this is something that's important to you. We do have some rental options for that, so you can try it just for a month and see if it works, and yeah, make your decision from there.
Okay, and so I have another question. So we were just talking about spherical panoramic backdrop, and so I'm specifically interested in this feature. How can I create a custom panoramic backdrop, spherical panoramic backdrop, using just regular photos taken from different sides of the house, or I also use like a lot of like 360 photography, but 360 photography might not be useful, right? Unless I'm getting to the roof of the house and shoot it from there. Yeah. So can I create a spherical panoramic backdrop, and what are the steps?
So you're breaking up just a little bit, but I think what I heard was you're interested in using 360 backdrops. So yes, you can take, a lot of cameras will allow you to create a panorama or a 360 kind of a spherical image. You can import those directly into Chief Architect as your backdrop that you would see through your window, and it will move and rotate and orient with your view. So if you're making a walkthrough, excuse me, or something like that, you would get some realistic movement of your spherical backdrop in your actual scene. And also we do have, which maybe you're also alluding to, we have the ability to export 360-degree views from Chief Architect. So once you get your rendering set up and have everything looking the way you like, you can come to this export menu and choose Export 360 Panorama. And yeah, it will just start your anchor point or the middle point of your 360 from where the camera is standing right here in the scene, and then it will just export a whole bunch of images and sew those together. So you can paste those on places like Facebook or share those.
Yeah, but I'm definitely using that, but I'm interested specifically, how can I import, let's say, photos taken with my camera, just regular camera, for instance, or with my cell phone, to create a 360 panoramic backdrop for the real project.
I see. So if your camera is capable of creating a spherical image, you can import that directly and it will just automatically behave as a spherical backdrop. So let me I'm going to make a copy of this and kind of go into those settings for you. So HDRI images are generally always 360. And when you, so if you download those and import them, then you'll find available this option to choose spherical backdrops, so that can be turned on, and then you have controls for the orientation there. You can kind of do like a poor man's version. Let's open maybe this scene again, where you can take any backdrop, so any flat photo that you have, any photo that you've taken, kind of like we mentioned before. Let me put one in here that's not as smart. So let me put some trees in my backdrop here. So you'll notice, let me close this window.
It does look great.
It does, and it also is static, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't going to be the most beautiful example, but I just want to kind of illustrate what you can do. If you come into your specify backdrop control, you can set this as a spherical backdrop as well.
I see where you're going. Yeah, but it doesn't create a good image either.
No, but what you can do is you can set the repeat. So I think this is a newer feature, maybe in, I can't remember which version, 15 perhaps. But you can set the tile distance, so it will break. It will just break that up. And if we look at that behavior, then it does kind of shrink it a little bit, so it doesn't look quite as bad. So that's kind of a poor man's solution to that particular issue if you don't have access to 360 or HDRI backdrops.
I do. So I'm using 360 camera a lot. So for kind of photographing interiors of the homes prior to redesigning the layout of the house. But the question is, so if what is like the shooting point where I position my camera to take spherical panoramic background with spherical panoramic background of the existing house? So do I have to go on the roof? Because if I position camera, let's say next to the front of the house, I will be getting just half of it, even less than that. So that's the question: how do I stitch two 360 images to kind of remove the portion of the house from it? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, you may be able to kind of do some of that in a photo editing software. You can't do that inside of Chief Architect, where you take multiple 360 views and kind of modge them together. Instead, probably what I would do is create your 360s like you're doing, and then as you have different cameras that are more facing different orientations from the inside to the outside of the scene, you can choose which 360 you'll be using for each of those cameras. So you can play that game of kind of switching it per camera that's active, so that you have, for that quadrant of the house, you would have something that's
basically using like 4 individual images taken with just regular cell phone, for instance, and using them for 4 different cameras pointing 4 different rooms, correct?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate.
Adrian, our next question is from Sean. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my question is I'm not sure if it's related for this course exactly, but an issue I'm running through in my ray trace is with my glass enclosure. when I do the ray trace, I kind of see like a reflection from the back, and it's cutting out, like it's like repeating itself. When I have a glass enclosure and when I have the glass door looks kind of different glass always from the rest, and it kind of makes everything in the back like off.
So it's like it's not refracting the light properly and it's distorting what's behind the glass?
Correct. It's
okay. A couple things that I would probably check, and if these don't seem like they work, then this might be a good plan example to send in so that we can kind of examine it more closely. But you can do two things I would probably focus on. And let me see here. Oh, it looks like my system might be frozen. You can check that the material property for your glass is set as transparent. So there's a material class called transparent, and then you have different levels of transparency that you can use in that material definition. Then the second thing, I can't show you right now because my program has locked up, is you can try setting the bit for thin. So under the transparent material property, there's a checkbox for thin in X16 up at the top, and that makes your surfaces for the glass double-sided, so that as the light passes through the glass, the refraction might be more realistic than what you're seeing right now.
okay. Okay, I'll give it a try. Thank you so much.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't show you that.
Adrian, did you want to make any announcements?
Yes, this is a perfect time for that. We have a couple announcements that I kind of wanted to share. We've hit the 1 o'clock mark, so it's been about an hour, and if you have other things that you need to get away to, then it's probably a nice time to do that. We'll be recording this session, and we'll send emails out with a link so that you can rewatch this video and see the complete video as the conversation continues. But I also wanted to share some upcoming events and training that's available with Chief Architect. So the first one on our list is Chief Academy, and that's our yearly event where you can come and visit us in Coeur d'Alene at our headquarters and really network with other Chief Architect users, see what they're doing to use the software, and learn about what we're doing for future releases. So it's kind of a cool way to kind of get sneak peeks and really understand how Chief Architect, the company, works a little more. And we also have more training options. So if we're not covering the topics that you are interested in today, or you just want to learn more, visit our events page and you can find all sorts of training opportunities. We have on-demand training that covers a lot of kind of classroom courses. And this is our last webinar for a little while, live webinar with Q&A on Thursdays. But tomorrow we do have a kitchen and bath boot camp that you can join. So if you're interested in learning more about kitchen and bathrooms, it's a great way to kind of expand your knowledge. Any more questions, Carrie? I might need to get my Chief restarted, but I could probably answer a couple more.
Okay, we have one more question in line, but if anybody wants to raise their hand, we'll call on you after that. We have Kelsey here. Hi, Kelsey. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Kelsey, I might be able to hear you, but no questions.
Okay, let's check in with Rick. Hi, Rick. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, we have Rachel here. Hi, Rachel. Go ahead and ask your question.
Everyone's become shy.
Hello, it's Rick.
Hi, Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
Hold on a sec, Ken. I see some neat vehicles in yours. I do a fair amount of luxury garages. Where do I find cars like that? All I'm finding in cheap is like looks kind of like a Ford F-150.
Yeah, fair enough.
I remember in the past, so you had Mustangs and stuff in cheap, but I'm not seeing those anymore.
Oh, okay. We do have a bonus catalog that's available for download. It's probably not the luxury cars that you're looking for, but we do have a partnership with BMW that has some older models a few years back of BMW. But for things like this Porsche, and I know in some of Scott's garages, he's found models, and usually what you can just do is search places like the 3D SketchUp warehouse, or just search for 3D models of cars, and you can often find free downloads for those.
Okay.
And there's plenty of paid downloads. So Chief Architect can import 3ds, SketchUp, DWG, and Collada file formats. So that kind of covers most of the bases for importing a custom object, and then you'll just have it to use in as many scenes as you like.
Excellent. Thanks, Adrian.
Yep, no problem.
All right, Adrian, our last question is from Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Rachel from Canada. My question is regarding the graphic card, because to use those things, and I think the 3D, the graphic card be solid. The requirement said is NVIDIA and Reason, if I remember. But if you have a laptop like that have an Intel Arc graphic with the AI, it will be okay?
You'll need a video card that is compatible with RTX and RX rendering, so that that's what supports the real-time ray tracing on the video card itself. Ryan, can you speak any more to the video cards that somebody would look for?
Yeah, I think you're asking about the Intel
that
Arc.
means because yes.
Yeah, so Intel Arc does support ray tracing. From a performance perspective, I don't think that it quite compares to NVIDIA and AMD, but I do believe that all Arc hardware will support ray tracing features.
That means we won't have issue, because right now I'm looking to change mine, because now it's like with the 3D, I have issue with my graphic. It keep telling me with the upgrading, keep telling me it's like it's slow. Really use it, it take more ever. Every time I do something, and I always have that message, is like the graphic card need to be updated. But I have that laptop that is new, but it has the Intel Arc. That means, will I still have those difficulty when working with all?
Well, it's hard to speculate, I guess, because I am not exactly sure what specific issues you're seeing. The first thing I would do is encourage you to contact tech support if you're having technical issues, because they have a lot of experience dealing with issues like that, and they might be able to help you upgrade your drivers or things like that without actually getting a new GPU.
I did that. Is why I know I need to upgrade it. But I'm wondering if having that particular laptop, the Asus ZenBook, if this software will work properly without giving me any trouble.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it sounds like you, based on what Ryan initially said, you do meet the system requirements, but it's probably a good idea to call into support and have a more thorough conversation with them. I think they can do a good job of help guiding you through that process. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Hopefully there was something useful that you picked up from this demonstration. And again, like I mentioned before, we're going to email a link out to this video so that you can kind of stay up to date with it. And I wanted to point out that all of these webinars have been recorded, and we eventually get those updated onto our Chief Architect video link on our website. So you're welcome to come and kind of browse all of these sessions that we've done with the Q&A on the different topics. So thanks again. Don't forget there's a boot camp tomorrow if you'd like to join that. And hopefully we'll see you next time when we host our next webinar. Have a good day.